Now we can hear you. Thanks, Charles. Prof, you are in presentation mode. I wonder if we can put you into presentation mode.
Well, because sometimes I go non-sequentially, I'd rather maximize my screen this way. It's visible still, no worries.
Perfect, perfect. And then I know that the guys also keen to have at least one picture with you. So if you're willing to put your camera on just for a second or two so we can take a quick pic, and then we'll turn it off again if you want.
Sure, here we go.
Ah, there we go. We're just giving it a couple more moments. I think the other session just finished, and we'll wait another minute or so, and then we can start.
Sure. So Linda, I'll go for about 45 minutes and then for 15 minutes for Q&A.
That sounds good. We've got until 4 o'clock. No, 10 to 4. 10 to 4 is when we'd like to wrap things up.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's then get going. It is. I wonder what time it is there where you are, Prof. Charles.
It's just 9 a.m.
Oh, okay. Right. In the morning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're going the other way around. Earlier this morning, we were speaking to someone who were at 10 o'clock at night. So we've gone right across the globe, but at least it's all still the 16th of October.
Yes.
So from my side, I would just like to introduce Prof. Charles. Prof. Charles Fadel is a French-born but US-based global education thought leader, futurist, and founder of the Center of Curriculum Redesign in Boston, Massachusetts. He's also a founding or a member of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development and the AI Experts Group specifically, and also a former chair of the Education Committee. And he's authored a number of landmark works in this field, including Education for the Age of AI, and then quite a while ago already, Artificial Intelligence in Education, and many other books, but also one on 21st century skills. And with more than 25 years of experience across 30 countries, Prof. Charles is continuing to shape how we teach and learn and lead in an AI-driven world. And we are very excited to have you here as our guest speaker this afternoon, Prof. And we look forward keenly to hear what you've got to share with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to share with you. Just so you know, I'm going to make this presentation available to you all via Linda, and so you don't have to scribble furiously. This will all be available. Okay, so sure. So if we were face-to-face, or at least in an easier setting, I would be asking how many of you have watched these movies or read these books, and typically I cannot find anyone who's looked at the whole thing. But I highly recommend, if you want to understand what AI is and where it's going, I really recommend science fiction far more than economists. Science fiction writers really got it right, and we are absolutely barreling down that path. So really, even something as seemingly old as a 1967 movie as 2001: A Space Odyssey is full of learning about where things are going. So what has changed since the beginning of my career is that when I started my AI company back in 1989, we could compute 3 layers of neurons. And that was on a processor called the Pentium at the time. And now with the NVIDIA processors, we can compute more than 5,000 layers. What has changed is 100 million-fold improvement in microprocessor or microcomputer capabilities, processing speed, and the cost of that processing speed dropping insanely to unfathomable to see how exponentials work. And so that's how we've gone to the amazing marvels we have in our pockets. Just as a quick reminder, we went to the moon in 1969 with 64K of memory. Now, if we don't have 64 gigs of memory in our phones, we feel depleted. So you see what this has done. And a lot of the progress in AI is actually due to microchips, whether it's processing power with 70% or memory size, well, memory data 20% of the progress, you're looking at only 10% of the progress due to algorithmic changes. And these algorithms date back to the 70s and 80s. So it's really been processing power. And along the way, we've seen a number of S-curves, which is normal. Any evolutionary system, according to Stephen Jay Gould, goes through punctuated equilibria. We've seen, every decade we've seen new hype and new disillusionment, but at every decade we've also seen things progress. And so we are moving in that direction, and the progress we've seen with this latest S-curve is quite amazing. But let me retrace back to the 2010s first very quickly. During the 2010s, machine learning was able to solve bounded problems. Even if their computational space was enormous, you see here 10 to the 535 power for Stratego, they were narrow bounded problems. They had clear sets of rules, and that was it. They were very, very delineated. Same thing, if you want to learn how to fold proteins, how proteins fold more exactly, well, that's a very narrow, crisp problem. But even to solve these problems, we needed a ton of data, right? You needed millions of chess games and so on, millions of examples to train these systems, these machine learning systems. Obviously, humans learn a lot faster than 6,800 years, but they don't necessarily achieve the same performance eventually, at least most of them. These systems are not just greedy, they're brittle. So for them, if they learn to recognize a face, they're really learning to recognize the components of a face. Because they don't have any context, for them, both faces on the left and the right are faces, whereas we know better as humans, because we understand context. And they're brittle, so you can go from recognizing a robin to thinking it's a cheetah just with a few different pixels, or from a stop sign to a speed limit sign just with a few missing pixels. So they're brittle, and they're shallow because of that. They don't transfer. If you teach them to recognize dogs, they're going to see dogs everywhere. And so that's how these machine learning systems worked. And finally, they're also opaque. We have no idea how they converge to recognizing faces. At what point does the recognition actually occur? Well, there's no such a thing. It occurs all the way throughout. Now, what changed in this decade, and particularly made visible since November 30, 2022 with GPT-3, is the fact that these large language models are trained on the entire internet, the entire corpus of knowledge that we have put out on the internet. Wikipedia and research papers, of course, but also, honestly, 40% of that training comes from Reddit, so just human chit-chat. And that explains, by the way, some of the hallucinations, because these models will approximate, they're really probabilistic models, looking at how words lined up, and sometimes a spurious word or concept will show up. Nevertheless, they're amazing, and we've seen much expanded expertise and some amount of transfer. But you can still see their inheritance because they're still brittle. They still hallucinate. They still come up with strange results. Here you're asking them to hide an elephant in the image, but because its corpus of training has never seen a hidden elephant, well, that's the best it can do. It doesn't have context. It doesn't know that humans are small compared to an elephant. So this is its attempt to hide an elephant in a picture. Now, it's easy to spot because it's a visual thing here, but imagine if it was a paragraph in a long text that says something that's not correct, but because you're not an expert, you don't know how to detect it. Here it's easy. What if it was a paragraph about healthcare? How would you know better? That's one of the limitations, clearly. Nevertheless, there's enormous potentiality in this phase. You know, we have legions of developers. We still have algorithms that are progressing. We are verticalizing the data sets into healthcare, education, and so on. We have faster hardware all the time. We're going to have AI on clients, meaning on your smartphones and your laptops. That's going to be really a game changer too. We have small language models, not just large language models, etc. So this is full of potential. And let's be serious here. It doesn't have to be perfect to be better than humans, most humans. And we are a bit, shall I say, kind to humans because we judge them by their intent, not by their results, whereas we're hard on the machines. And so, you know, one machine kills a human by driving, well, bad robots, you know, but 5,000 humans get killed by other humans driving every year in the US. No one says a peep. So you see, we have different measures for what success means. So after this brief technical introduction, I'm going to go into, you know, what are we talking about when we say, well, jobs will be replaced? Well, the major fallacy that you read about is that people confuse passing a test, like say a medical test or a legal test, with doing a task of a doctor or lawyer, with doing the job of the doctor or the lawyer. So let me take a simple example here. Just because you're a cleaning agent doesn't mean you're a washing machine. Just because you can do the washing doesn't mean you're doing the laundry. So you see the difference between a small, tiny task versus a larger task versus a job. A job requires flexibility, judgment, common sense. Machines do not have it at this point. So, continuing on. One of the difficulties we have is to realize that, yes, some jobs may be replaced, some jobs may be, some tasks may be substituted, but we also are terrible at imagining the new jobs that emerge. And so these are the jobs that the World Economic Forum missed out on. Back in 2017, they admitted they never saw these jobs coming. So we may very well be in a similar situation where we don't exactly see what are the other jobs that are coming. And so a reasonable expectation is to think that some of the tasks that humans do may be replaced, may be automated, but there may be other tasks that will be needed and be possible now with help from the machine. A very crude example would be the spreadsheet helping bookkeepers migrate from paper notebooks, paper ledgers, to being able to deliver what-if scenarios. Okay? In reality, we have no idea where things are going. We tend to overestimate things in the short run and fall prey to the hype, but eventually, technologies really surprise us eventually. And that's an effect that no one really understands, certainly not economists and so on. And so we're in a situation akin to Jean-Marc Coté in 1899, trying to forecast what a robot, a cleaning robot, would be like with the technologies of the time. Mechanical engineering was the big, high tech of the time. There were no cheap electric motors, small electric motors. There were no electronics for another 50 years. So there was no way he could imagine Roomba. And so here we are, of course, with a compressed time frame of probably 20 years, trying to imagine Roomba. Very, very impossible to do, in my opinion, at least. And I spent countless hours thinking about it and read countless things, and I don't think anyone really can tell. One thing is sure is that we're going to have some form of generalized intelligence, some form of, not all of it. That means that the students that are graduating now are going to be hit by that. And whether it's high school or college, we have this preparation for jobs that's going to be required. But education is so slow to adapt, that that's my concern. And so what we have now really is, with the digital revolution, something akin to what happened during the Industrial Revolution. We had to invent mass schooling, and now we have to mass sophisticate our education. What does this mean? If you had a child, what would your advice be for them? Well, at least my advice would be as versatile as possible. We have no idea whether you're going to have to be a plumber or a painter or a poet or a physician or a physicist, right? Really, things are going to depend on where AI goes. And so I'd like to give that child the broader possible set of tools, and then over time, depending on the tasks and the jobs at hand, sharpen those tools. So it goes a bit against the over-specialization too early that you see, being demanded in high school. And it goes certainly against the first 2 years of over-specialization, even during college, where you would want the first 2 years to be as full of general studies as possible, but really well architected. And we can talk more about that, and I can share also with you a paper I'm writing on that topic. And so, in essence, that means that we have to modernize the traditional disciplines. We have to, of course, teach for skills, basically how you use your knowledge, how you behave and engage in the world, your character, and how you reflect and adapt. And reflection and adaptation are really, really key in a world that's constantly challenged by AI. Well, that means that we need to modernize the traditional disciplines, as in, why so much trigonometry and so little data science or discrete and computational math? Why do we teach only acting, but not often debate, and certainly not comedy or improv? Well, why not? If adaptability is at a premium, then improv is one of those techniques that allows you to be highly adaptable, and so on. Same thing. We talk about STEM, but we don't teach the T&E of STEM. So here, of course, this is for K through 12, this example, but why not in higher ed? Why wouldn't we do systematically for all first 2 years of students general studies that also have technology and engineering? And I don't mean to the point of designing something, but interpreting and appreciating technology. I mean, if I was to do a poll now about how many of you know how their smartphone works, I might be disappointed. And yet, we rely on them. And so I'm not asking anyone to design an engine, but I certainly expect people to understand not just biology, but biotech, not just physics, but clean tech, not just chemistry, but nanotech, pushing things forward. And same for the social sciences. If they are so necessary to understand ourselves and others, why aren't they mandatory, even for the engineering majors or the science majors? Same for entrepreneurship and business. We're going to be constantly challenged to get new jobs or new activities. Well, why wouldn't we teach entrepreneurship and business. So you see, that's what I mean by modernizing the what. And then there's also, of course, skills, character, and meta learning, the competencies. And as Linda said, back in 2008, I wrote 21st Century Skills, and I felt very gratified to see that moniker used around the world. Well, yeah, but that was skin deep, because when we did research with Brookings recently, about 4 years ago, we found out that none of the leading edge jurisdictions were doing anything about it. They were not offering professional development. They were not offering assessments. Basically, they were throwing a bunch of PDFs at teachers and saying, good luck to you. Furthermore, what's happening with AI is that AI is also having an impact on these competencies. Yes, they're needed for humans, but AI can also complement and catch up in some senses. And so what should our emphasis be nowadays? Well, it's not enough to only teach creativity. We have to put the emphasis on imagination. And same for critical thinking, but push us into decision making, etc. So you see for each one of the competencies how far they need to be pushed nowadays. And let me highlight the last two here. They're very, very special, because what differentiates humans, at least for the longest time to come, who knows how long, but at least for the longest time to come, is adaptability. Adaptability is really the key here. If there's one word I'd like you to remember from this entire presentation, is adaptability. And then ask yourself, what are you doing in how you're teaching to foster that adaptability? And of course, self-directed and continuous learning is going to be more necessary than ever. You cannot rest on your laurels. You're constantly chased by an AI. It's a snowball behind you. Well, perhaps not a great example for South Africa, I apologize. But you basically have to run to where the ball will be. If you're playing football, you're not going to run after the ball where the ball was. So in addition to all of this, clearly we have to motivate students, because they're going to say, well, why would I learn anything because AI is going to do everything for me? Well, first, of course, they don't understand scaffolding. So you have to explain to them that they're not going to play video games for 20 years and then all of a sudden wake up and know how to use AI. But you also have to motivate them, and that motivation can come from developing their identity, agency, and purpose. Another way to talk about purpose is the Ikigai model. Ikigai model say, yes, sure, do what you love, but you have to be good at it. It would be great if that's what the world needs, and certainly would be better if you get out of your parents' basement at some point, because you can be paid for it. And to that effect, we have developed a database of 340 projects that are mapped to the UN SDGs and the global challenges for humanity, etc. And you can see the 10 project vectors in the first column. Okay, and now finally, AI as an edtech in the classroom. Well, we are as limited at this point as Jean-Marc Coté was in 2000, although note the cool metaphor here, right? The books get cranked somehow into electric signals that somehow get transmitted to the student's ears/brain. It's a cute metaphor, but that's what we're all trying to figure out. And there's a plethora of companies claiming one slice or another of Gen AI in education slice. The goal for all of us is to give teachers and professors, give all faculty an exobrain, and to be able to, do what technology helps us do. Go higher, faster, carrying heavier loads, etc. An exobrain in this case. And of course, we have to guard against the concerns being over-reliance. Of course, there are other concerns, right? People are worried about killer drones and this and that and the other, sure. But as smartphones and text messages and social media has shown up, the problem actually comes from within much more than from outside. From within, in the sense that our brains are lazy by good evolutionary design. Our brains represent 20% of the energy consumption of the body for 30% of the body mass. So it's an inherently expensive organ to run from a caloric standpoint. And so it has a tendency to put itself on autopilot as often as possible to save energy and rely on existing heuristics. And sure, that makes sense. Most of the time, it actually makes a lot of sense. But at some point, you have to wake up and say, wait a second, I can't judge a book by its cover. I can't judge this person by their face. I gotta think here. And if we don't train that thinking, if we rely on AI to give us all the answers without thinking, we're going to develop all sorts of problems related to over-reliance. And so that's the big fear. Remember, with smartphones, we basically cratered attention spans. With SMSs, with text messages, we cratered the sense of commitment. You know, people blow you off at the last second and don't show up at a meeting and say, oh, sorry, via text message. The sense of commitment has disappeared. With social media, of course, we have created critical thinking in as much as it existed much in the first place. We have created, what was reliable information. And now with AI, we stand to crater more critical thinking, more cognitive capabilities. And so we certainly have to guard and design our systems so that they help to combat that. Oh, by the way, let's keep in mind, we're also going to be seeing augmented reality and virtual reality emerge in the next few years. And that too is going to add to the stressors to our cognition. And so one of the first things that need to be done is, of course, AI literacy. And we've designed this AI literacy course. I'm going to give you the analogy here. You don't have to read all this because obviously I'm sending you the presentation. But the analogy here is to learn how to drive a car. Yeah, I'm going to remove the temptation. The analogy is to learn how to drive a car. Right now, if you look at the AI literacy courses that are offered, you either have too shallow or too deep. Google and Microsoft and others will offer you a 3-hour session. Well, this is what AI is about. It's very much like saying, well, this is what a car is. Here's how you recognize a car. Okay, cool, not enough. Or university level Coursera types of, because faculty those things right, those things as you wanting to become an expert rather than you become a user. So as a user, you don't need to know to learn how the engine operates to great detail. You don't need to become an expert at the fuels, electricity or fossil fuels. You don't have to be a chemist. You don't have to be a mechanical engineer. You don't have to be a mechanic either. You have to know how to drive the car. And that's what's really hard for systems to dose, because most of us are users of a discipline, whether it's mathematics or physics or social sciences, etc. Most people are not experts in those things. Most people are users of these disciplines. And so the difficulty here is to right size the education when it comes to AI literacy for all, including faculty that are not in computer science. And so that analogy holds. You need to learn the road code. You need to learn the absolute basics of what a car is capable of, meaning, well, it has brakes, so it can brake, it can accelerate, etc. Learn how to drive it. But you don't need to know enormous details about pistons and pressure and so on. Or in the case of battery, battery currents and so on. However, that's not sufficient. What we're also working on is a next module, which is teaching with the machines. So here we've taught you how to drive the car, but what are you going to use it for that is wise? You can carry heavier loads. You can go farther distances. You can go faster. But how do we do all this without atrophying your muscles, right? That's the atrophy of muscles is a concern. And so the same analogy, the same metaphor works for AI. How are we going to train you to think with the machines so that you don't, atrophy your brain? And that's the challenge for all of us. So obviously, we're designing this module, and we'll be happy to share it with you at some point. And yeah, it's always a complicated road, and we always have challenges, and that's why I love this quote from Mandela, very appropriate in your case, but I use it in all of my presentations because it's really where we're all at. We always have these challenges that humanity asks of itself. We are the ones moving things forward, and we're creating our own set of issues in the meantime. And so finishing here, I'm going to keep this up for a moment, and of course you'll have the slides, but point here is there's a lot to unpack, and obviously in 40 minutes or so I don't have time to unpack all of it, but I'm sure you are you're in your practice you may need more details than I was able to share with you, and so you'll have access to this book, and I thank you for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, so much to unpack and so many things to consider. Let me just have a look at the chat. You're welcome to either put your questions to Prof. Charles in the chat, or alternatively put your hand up and get us going with a discussion. I might put you on the spot, Prof, and ask, since much of your work is centering around the redesigning of curricula for relevance in the AI era, I was wondering if you could tell us what is the one practical change that you would implement in our education systems tomorrow that you think could better prepare our students for this new reality?
AI literacy. Simple. That's the one. Now, if you ask, so how would we redesign AI? How would we redesign the university experience? That's a different question. I'm happy to answer it, and perhaps I should do so given the audience here, but let's see what's in the chat. Okay, nothing yet. At least that is visible to me. So
yeah, by all means, let's hear your thoughts.
Okay, so you are a young student. You know that AI is going to be messing things up for you upon graduation. It moves really fast. You know that corporations are a bit nervous about hiring because they don't know exactly your value anymore if you have AI breathing down your neck. Of course, some of these fears are overblown, but for the time being, they're real fears, and they may remain so because AI is going to continue progressing. In other words, the first one or two rungs of the ladder may be missing by the time you graduate. So, what are you to do as a student? Well, if I was a student and my daughter was still that age, I would recommend that you spend the first 2 years be as broad as possible. Take as many general ed courses as you can. But please, let's have general ed courses that are broad, not overly narrow. For instance, my daughter took a course on Vietnamese religions. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but why couldn't it have been comparative religions? Something broader than just a narrow dive into what the faculty is comfortable with. It has to be a broader thing. It could be a course on linguistics rather than just Latin, etc., etc. You see what I mean by the depth of, even within a discipline, we need general ed courses that are broad, technology and engineering for the non-engineers, etc. Right? I spent 2 years doing as many of these courses as I can. Oh, by the way, not neglecting the arts. You heard my pitch here about performing arts in particular, with improv and comedy, not neglecting sports, because part of the pitch on adaptability could be sports that make you adaptable. For instance, sailing, constantly changing conditions, right, in the ocean. So sailing is a complicated thing. Um, Martial arts, but not the calm, quiet, pretty dojo stuff, but no, street fighting, like Krav Maga, and so on. So you see, a really broad but clever first 2 years. At the end of the first 2 years, I would write my thesis of sorts, saying, okay, well, I'm going to choose XYZ discipline. I'm going to do research on what AI is going to do to my discipline, as far as I can tell, and as far as I can extrapolate. Based on that, I'm going to devise the next 2 years of study, which will be, more specialization, even at the bachelor's level. But I need to design that to work with AI to catapult me to above that broken rung of the ladder. So in essence, I'm demanding of myself that I become much better in my specialty in 2 years, accelerated by AI, so I can jump over the first rung. And that also means finding internships profusely so that people know how to value me, because we know that a diploma is only a 10% predictor of success in a job, whereas an internship is a 45% predictor of success in a job. And so that's what I would do. And that's what I would recommend universities shape themselves to allow students to do this sort of work.
Well, I do agree. I do think that the nature of universities is going to have to change significantly. And as you say, much less focus on specializations which make you singularly, competent. And then if AI becomes competent as well, you're obsolete. Rather have us have that overarching broad base of firm foundations for the future. And then, as you say, linking that to industry and the profession and real life. Again,
Exactly.
bringing us back to that 21st century skills.
Well, and that's what IBM has been talking about for a long time, the T-shaped person, right? You're broad and deep, and not one or the others. So higher ed tries to make us more deep than broad. K-12 tries to make us broad and not so deep. Really, it's a question of doing both in both cases. You need to be broad and deep selectively. And so that's why I said the following 2 years of my bachelor's degree, the third and fourth year, that's when you would want to become more specialized, but deeper faster. Literally, now you have a car to help you go deeper faster.
Yeah. I want to give the other people a chance to. I have more questions, but let's see if there are any hands from the audience. As always, you can turn your mic on and start speaking.
I saw a question pop up for briefly, but I don't know where it is now.
Sure, I can read it to you. It says, as AI tools become more capable of generating sophisticated work, how do you see assessment evolving to ensure authenticity and integrity in student learning?
Well, one good thing, in a sense, about AI is that it's putting the spotlight on a lot of our assumptions about what learning, and sometimes what constituted us was somewhat deficient. If memorization, if medical tests and legal tests can be passed by an AI, that means a lot of it was memorization. And if that's how we judge knowledge, that's no longer sufficient, because we've had search engines and now we have AI memorization isn't sufficient for a doctor or lawyer. So what else is required? That's where the assessments are going to need to change and start measuring the application of that knowledge, right? The critical thinking aspects, etc., and how do you do with that knowledge in an open way for yourself, for the planet. So it relies a lot more on producing something with that knowledge rather than just displaying it, right? In essence, a test, an assessment is a display, and here we're going to want to test that's actually a production of something hopefully original, not easily replicable by AI. That pushes us. Yeah, it's not easy. So let's take the example of the essay that everyone is bemoaning, right? Well, first of all, is the essay the right way of putting your thoughts together? I'm just asking the question. If an essay is there to help you really think hard, there may be other mechanisms to really think hard than writing an essay. But suppose you still want an essay. Fine. I would ask the student to write an essay without technology. I would then ask them to write it with technology. I would look at their prompts and I would look at their comparison between the two essays. I'm forcing them to become metacognitive, right? So it's just a step above. Yes, it forces the faculty to do something different. We're always never particularly thrilled by change. That's just human nature. But in this case, it's, in my opinion, at least a interesting change. It's a good one. It forces us to be more performant from both as a faculty and as a student. It's interesting work. So yeah, it comes with challenges. So does any technology. I'll remind you that Socrates was bemoaning the fact that scripts were invented because you didn't need to memorize as many things as you did in the past. Well, yeah. Okay, but we were able to offload our memories and share our memories, and so collectively we became a lot smarter. Even if from a single individual's perspective, we have far less memory than, let's say, someone in the rainforest who knows all the plants by heart, right?
Yeah, yeah. So we have another question. It is, other than adaptability and commitment, what do you believe are the most essential human capacities we need to preserve and intentionally design for in the age of AI?
So you saw the list, but I'm going to redisplay it quickly. This is 3 years worth of analysis to come up with that list. It didn't come out of thin air. And so the list is here in the second column: creativity, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, etc. And with their particular emphasis that you see here. Those are your lists. If you go to our website, you will find a lot of documentation and summarization as well of what these are all about and how you teach them and so on. We also have designed professional development to help faculty embed these things in their teaching rather than make it an extra layer, which doesn't work. It's really a question of infusing this. As you're teaching matrices in mathematics, you're also teaching critical thinking, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Let's check if there are any other questions. There's a
meta-emotion. Well, Bianca Lecornu is asking about meta-emotion. Well, you may have heard about it with different wording, growth mindset, or things like that. We are trying to be very, very precise with language and trying to use taxonomy and ontologies that are really, really clean. And that's why rather than using, we're trying to use in this case a word that's very akin to metacognition. So meta-emotion is feeling about your feelings. the same way that metacognition is thinking about your thinking. It's not something that we activate very often, but it's something that's required. So when I talk about social sciences, I'm not only talking about them in a flat sort of way where you know how to diagnose something in someone else. I'm talking about this as an introspection mechanism as well. Let's see, another question from Sicolette Fu. What's your perspective?
So I can read it. What is your perspective
on how?
It.
Yeah, I have it here in front of me.
Okay.
Well, you're asking me here a political question in a sense, which I do not have an answer to. You know, governments are not exactly doing very well for all of us nowadays, and they're falling behind where the action is. So I would say, honestly, try to not rely on governments. You try to do whatever you want with your local means and mechanisms, and don't wait for someone to come and save you. Sure, you're going to have an accessibility gap, inadequate infrastructure, etc. That's not your role. That's the government's role, and I don't have an answer about how you push a government forward. That's not my work, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think in our own worlds, we've got to do what we can with the resources that we have and the access that we have. But it's an important role for us to play in this new world. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, if I may say, you're always also going to have a divide between rural and urban environments because of sparsity. You know, a sparse environment is not going to have the same amount of resources as you have in a dense environment. It's just pure economics. You know, if you go to a larger city, you're going to have specialized stores in all sorts of things, selling you buttons for shirts or whatever. Strange specialized stores. You're not going to have strange specialized stores in a remote village. You're going to have a general store carrying the most commonly used items. And that's the fact of population density and distribution. So there's going to be limits to how much you can do. You're not going to have optic fibers going to every village. It's not going to happen. And so I'm sorry to say, but whether it's a poor country or rich country, it doesn't make as much difference as whether it's rural or urban. It's really the density that makes a difference, not as much the richness of the country.
Well, I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, and you've given us a playlist for the weekend, a Netflix playlist for the weekend.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Prof. Charles, for this fascinating and deeply thought-provoking talk. You've not just given us insights into artificial intelligence in education, but certainly a vision about how we can reimagine our own teaching and learning practices in this world that is evolving so fast. So we are grateful for your global perspective. We look forward to reading your book and to get our hands on that one too. And thank you again for making the time for us today. We appreciate the wisdom.
It's my sincere pleasure, and good luck to you. I mean, you are in the trenches. You are doing the hard part. So my best wishes to you all.
Right. Thank you so much. And then that's wrapping us up for today, or the main formal part of the day. We'll go into our last closing session, and there's a little bit of a lucky draw, and there's a competition or two. So Prof, if you have a moment, you're welcome to join us in Kumo Space as well, but I do think there's one more link before we go into Kumo Space. Am I right? Yeah.
We're actually staying in the session.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I have to leave you. I have a call with Ukraine coming up now. So.
Oh, lovely. Okay then.
Sure.
Thanks, Prof. Have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bianca, can I hand over?